They stopped Napoleon. They financed the British Empire. They helped create an entire nation from scratch, and they did it all from a cramped ghetto in Frankfurt, Germany. You've probably heard conspiracy theories about the Rothschilds. Some of them are wild, some are dangerous, but the real story, the actual documented history of this family, that's more extraordinary than any conspiracy theory. Today, we're telling the true story of the House of Rothschild, how a family with nothing built an empire that quietly shaped the modern world. Frankfurt, Germany, 1760s, in a filthy, cramped street called Judengasse, which literally translates to Jew Alley, an entire community lived locked away from the rest of the city. Jewish people in medieval Europe were forbidden from owning land. They couldn't work most professions. At night, the gates of the ghetto were physically locked shut. They were isolated, looked down on, considered second class at best, and from this alley, this forgotten, suffocating corner of Europe, emerged a family that would go on to control the finances of kings, emperors, and entire governments. The irony of history is almost too much to believe. The Red Shield. Above one particular house in Judengasse, there hung a red shield. In German, Rot means red, and Shield means shield. That is where the name Rothschild comes from. Not a title, not a dynasty name, just a red shield hanging above a door. In that house was born Meyer Amschel Rothschild, and Meyer Amschel would become the founder of the most powerful banking dynasty in history. The young Meyer. As a young man, Meyer was sent to study at a Jewish religious school, but his parents died when he was still a teenager, and he was forced to find work. He got a job at a Jewish banking firm in the city of Hanover, where he learned the mechanics of money, currency exchange, international trade, the movement of wealth across borders. He returned to Frankfurt with that knowledge, and he opened a small shop in the ghetto. Second-hand goods, old clothes, nothing remarkable. But inside that shop, Meyer Amschel was building something far more important than a retail business. Here is where Meyer Amschel made his first genius move. He started collecting rare antique coins. In 18th century Europe, nobility collected rare coins the way some people today collect rare watches or vintage sneakers. It was a status symbol. Meyer made meticulous catalogues of his rarest pieces and sent them to royal courts across Europe, asking, "Is anyone interested in buying?" Through this simple strategy, he got an audience with one of the most powerful men in the German states, Prince William of Hesse, and Prince William bought some coins. That small transaction was the opening of a door that would never close again. Prince William of Hesse, the connection that launched an empire. Prince William was extraordinarily wealthy, and he had made much of his money in a very specific and rather grim way. He rented out German soldiers as mercenaries to foreign governments. In fact, during the American Revolutionary War, it was William's Hessian soldiers who fought on the British side against George Washington and the Continental Army. You may have heard of the Hessians. That is where the name comes from. Prince William's mercenary business. Through coin dealings, Meyer slowly became William's trusted financial agent, and in 1769, William granted Meyer a prestigious title, court factor to Prince William of Hesse, an officially approved royal merchant. Meyer put up a sign outside his little shop. He had arrived, and his next move was to never stop climbing. Before we go further, it's worth pausing to ask a question that often gets ignored. Why were Jewish people so dominant in finance and banking in medieval Europe? Is this just a stereotype, or is there a real historical explanation? There is a very real, very documented historical explanation, and it has nothing to do with ethnicity or inherent ability. It has everything to do with the rules of medieval Christian society. The Catholic Church, which dominated European life for centuries, had a strict rule. Christians were forbidden from lending money to other Christians and charging interest. This practice was called usury. The Church considered it a sin. Taking money and making more money from money, morally wrong according to the Church. But here's the obvious problem. Economies run on credit. Kings needed loans to fund wars. Merchants needed capital to fund trade expeditions. There was a massive, yawning gap in the market for lenders. Jewish religious law had different rules. Jewish people could charge interest when lending to non-Jews. And because almost every other profession was closed to them, no land ownership, no guild membership, no government positions, money lending and trade became two of the very few paths available. The result was a historical paradox. European Christian society publicly condemned usury, while privately being completely dependent on Jewish moneylenders to function. Meyer Amschel Rothschild was the most talented heir to centuries of that tradition. Meyer Amschel had 5 sons, and he saw in those 5 sons the architecture of something no single banker could ever build alone. He taught them one rule above all others. He said, "You are 5 arrows. A single arrow can be broken easily. 5 arrows bound together cannot be broken by any force." And then he sent them out. Amschel Jr. stayed in Frankfurt to hold the home base. Nathan, the most brilliant of the 5, went to London, the financial capital of the world. James went to Paris. Solomon went to Vienna. Karl went to Naples. 5 sons, 5 capitals, 1 family. And the key to making this work was something that no competitor had, a private rapid communication network across the entire continent. Couriers on fast horses, coded letters, information that moved faster than governments could move their own intelligence. Meyer Amschel understood, long before anyone else, that in finance, information is power. The family that knows first wins. The bill of exchange, the system they mastered. The Rothschilds perfected the use of what were called bills of exchange, essentially the early ancestors of modern wire transfers and checks. You deposit money in Frankfurt, receive a paper document, travel to London, present the document to the Rothschild branch there, and receive your money in local currency. No need to carry bags of gold across dangerous roads. For the first time, large amounts of money could move invisibly across borders, and the Rothschilds controlled the pipes through which that money flowed. Of the 5 Rothschild brothers, Nathan Mayer Rothschild was in a class of his own. He arrived in London with capital, connections, and an almost frightening ability to read financial markets. And then came the moment that would cement the Rothschild legend forever. Funding Wellington, 1814. First, some context. By 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte's French Empire had been tearing Europe apart for over a decade. British forces under the Duke of Wellington were fighting in Spain. They needed money. Specifically, they needed European gold coins that soldiers and local merchants would actually accept. British gold coins weren't welcome everywhere. British Treasury official John Charles Herries reached out to Nathan Rothschild. Nathan, using the family's network across 5 countries, quietly sourced massive quantities of gold currency from across the continent and moved it to Wellington's forces in Spain. The British army kept fighting. Napoleon's days were numbered, and the Rothschilds had just become bankers to the British government. The Battle of Waterloo, June 18, 1815. Now we arrive at the most famous story in Rothschild history, and it requires some careful handling, because the legend and the documented reality are slightly different, but both are extraordinary. June 18, 1815, the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon Bonaparte versus the Duke of Wellington, the most consequential military battle in a generation. If Napoleon wins, his empire is revived. If Wellington wins, it's over. The London Stock Exchange was paralysed with anxiety. British government bonds, called consols, were in freefall. If Britain lost, those bonds would be worthless. People were selling in a panic. The Rothschild communication network, their private couriers, their fast boats across the English Channel, got the news of the battle's outcome to Nathan before any government dispatch arrived in London. Nathan knew Britain had won. He knew the bonds would soon rocket in value. And what did he do? He walked to the London Stock Exchange. He bought, and kept buying while everyone else was selling in panic. When the official government dispatch confirmed Wellington's victory, the bond prices exploded. Nathan had turned a massive profit in a matter of days, on a scale that the British government itself could not match in years. Now, historian Niall Ferguson, who wrote the definitive biography of the Rothschilds, notes that the most dramatic versions of this story are embellished. Nathan didn't manufacture the panic himself, but the core facts are documented. The Rothschild network did receive the news early. Nathan did make very large bond investments, and he did profit enormously when prices rose. The outcome is the same. The details are just less cinematic than legend suggests. After Waterloo, Nathan Rothschild wasn't just a successful banker. He was the dominant force in British finance.